Caring for the vulnerable, more support will be provided for the retirement needs of seniors and to empower persons with disabilities. And for more analysis, we're joined by Dr. Mathew Mathews from the Institute of Policy Studies. Dr. Mathews, what are the key highlights of DPM Wong's speech that stood out for you?
Well, one thing that stood out was this emphasis on not just the need to take care of the more disadvantaged groups, which we often hear mentioned, and there's been a lot of effort on that front, but also this discussion on the needs of the broad middle of society, and this promise that continued improvement will be seen in their lives and those of their children. So it's very good to hear that there are plans for this broad middle class, especially with opportunities, whether it's reskilling, and of course, in our very turbulent global economy where job losses are very hard to predict, some kind of way to cushion to help people stay afloat and get back to work in the case of retrenchments.
Dr. Mathews, we understand meritocracy to mean that promise that socio-economic rewards are going to follow individual talent and effort, if you put it in, and it's not about origin. But has meritocracy become the reason for what we're seeing as rising inequality in Singapore?
Well, it seems that inevitable, actually, that meritocracy does lead to some kind of inequality. And that's because meritocracy often leads to some kind of entrenchment of social groups. And with those who have been able to attain a good standard of living, they're able to pass those opportunities, that capital, to their children, and then continue to climb. And sometimes that climb is at an exponential rate. And they're able to do much better in life, earn very good salaries. So, well, the reverse is also true. That means those who started off disadvantaged, they don't climb as much, very modest climbs. And in Singapore, when that increase is a lot smaller, you begin to see that one group is able to afford a lot more, the other one is not able to. And of course, that means there'll be sizable inequality there.
Or how will rethinking mindsets about schools and grades and also becoming a society that learns from cradle to grave, how will either of these help to broaden our notion of meritocracy?
No, currently, people view learning as what you do in school, and that pretty much decides your potential. And of course, if you grew up in a background which emphasized a lot of achievement in school and provided you the means to do better in school, but think tuition, think enrichment, then of course you go on and get better credentials. But as society shifts, we focus more on skills. People keep acquiring. So that broadens the possibilities for everyone. The credentials, which used to be the signal, no longer is what defines you. And really what is given to you is this opportunity to acquire more skills as you go along the way. And then, of course, you're able to achieve more and more success. So, yes, in a full-fledged learning society, that will broaden opportunities and therefore also broaden meritocracy.
Let's talk a little bit about that issue of opportunities, Dr. Mathews, because DPM Wong also spoke about economic growth, that it is a non-negotiable, and the importance of securing economic competitiveness for Singapore. Our competitiveness, though, in Singapore is in skills-heavy advanced manufacturing. It is in service sectors as well. Is this at odds with the government's push for a new definition of success that is not the status quo?
Well, the new definition of success is really for us to be the best possible version of ourselves, where talents are well respected. And expectedly, you also find that when you got certain kind of talents, then you also see a kind of, betterment of your standard of life. And so for that, the economy has to be diverse enough to allow a range of talents to grow. While it's true that, in Singapore, there is an emphasis and the competitive areas tend to be those which are skills heavy. If this goal to continue to prepare people with skill upgrading, is going to come to fruition, then really what you will notice is that people continue to be able to grow and they're able to leverage into these parts of the economy which are extremely competitive. And I think that will make it very possible for people to realize this new definition of success.
Dr. Mathews, DPM Wong also mentioned that the new social compact should be less about the individual and more about collective responsibility. How do you see Singaporeans being open to that idea when they might have more pressing issues such as individual standards of living?
Well, in theory, of course, most Singaporeans agree that we need to prioritize the needs of the collective. And of course, if the community does better, it's good for all of us, including as individuals. But in reality, of course, there are often very pressing issues. We've got our hopes, we've got our aspirations for our children, our families. And that probably has an outsized influence on the kind of choices we make. So it's probably necessary as you go along for the government to continue to remind Singaporeans from time to time, for our community to remind each other about the needs of taking responsibility and a collective responsibility, that all of us need to get involved in the solution. And sometimes the truth is that what benefits the collective may not always work out for the individual, and we sometimes have to live with that.
Thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Mathew Mathews from the Institute of Policy Studies.